I'm Tina Wynn, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, and we are thrilled to have Bobette Buster with us here today for our second Art Talk at Oklahoma Christian. Bobette is a professor of the practice of digital storytelling at Northeastern, and she is a producer of the documentary Making Waves, The Art of Cinematic Sound, and an acclaimed author, and a consultant and trainer, consulting with producers such as Pixar and 20th Century Fox and Disney Animation and Disney Channel and Sony Animation and
Google and BBC and many corporations around the world where I've done workshops and who asked me to come in and speak to their in-house departments.
Great. Well, Bobette, our Art Talk series explores the intersection of arts, religion, and culture. I'm interested in how you hear that and how you experience that intersection. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think it's all one piece. It's who we are as people. I mean, we're spirit beings, and we're living a spiritual life in this world, and we're affecting each other, and we come from a culture. And I feel that the arts best express who we are, and everybody has a talent, everyone has a story to tell. And so when I hear that, I think it's at our best, it's when we are acting out our own story in the world, and that's what makes us fully alive.
So in your TEDx talk, entitled The Radical Act of Storytelling, I'm really interested in that term, radical act. How did you choose that, and what does that mean to you, that storytelling's a radical act?
Well, I think that all of us have a story to tell. We're living a story, but most people think, oh, well, nothing special about my life. And they've sort of put in the background of their mind the importance of what they're living through and their point of view. And their point of view is everything, and we need to hear it. I think right now we're living in a fractured time where has retreated to a silo thinking. You're looking for people of like mind to share your impressions with. But storytelling forces you out of your comfort zone and puts your ideas and stories in front of others who would not otherwise know your worldview. And that is the only way civilization advances, is when we hear the stories of other people. That's how it's always been since the beginning of time. And that is also the only way that we each develop imagination, enough imagination to really live our lives, is from hearing stories. And none of us have enough imagination.
I love hearing that idea of not having enough imagination and how we play into each other and how we need others' imagination. Can you expand on that?
I feel that passionately because we're storytelling beings. We're hardwired to respond to stories. You know, that's what we read to children. That's what they want, is the warmth and love of being read to and told stories. That's how children learn to feel comfortable in the world, is by hearing stories. That enlarges their perception of, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can thrive. Yes, bad times will come, especially if they hear fairy tales. They can realize that, oh, yes, you know, a wolf may come to the door, but if I keep going, someone will take care of me. There's many reasons for the uses of enchantment, which is something I talk about in my lectures. But the important thing is, stories create a spiritual muscle by which we are given the visual ability to know that we can develop courage to survive and thrive. We do not get that on our own. We get that from learning it, hearing it, and being in the world of story. And originally it was all oral storytelling, and then eventually we could read. But reading is a relatively recent thing in humanity, right? And now, of course, we are in the world of cinematic digital storytelling. That's a thrill. It's mesmerizing and immersive. But the important thing is to be in a position to hear each other's stories. That's how we become better people.
I love that. And you mentioned hardwired, and you say in your talks that we are all hardwired to recognize story, and then in your book, Do Story, you talk about how you spend the majority of your time as a teacher, as a professor, listening, and you've listened to stories across all cultures. So I thought about that kind of juxtaposed. How does your listening to stories across all cultures connect with your idea that we're hardwired for story? I find that interesting.
There's no more honest audience than a child. They're either going to be engaged by you and laugh, or get scared. They're going to react. And all of us have a story that we love, that we're passionate about. As children growing up, as teens, we have a person we cherish. We're loyal to that story or that character. And as we get older, we long to hear the stories of our loved ones. There's been studies done that the greatest form of happiness for people, it was done by Emory University, was if people could hear the stories of their own elders, their grandparents, great-grandparents, even parents, how they went through rough times, whether it was the Depression or, a reversal in the family, and the family talks about, yeah, that was a tough time, and this is how we got through it, or somebody went away to war, or whatever. It strengthens the listener to say, oh, they got through that. I can do that too. It creates a foundation of realization that you can get through whatever life reverses you may have or disappointments. Storytelling creates courage, and we are not born with courage. We're born with maybe daring do or mischief making, but courage comes from a psychological awareness that you can choose to do something and you dare to do it. And you only get that from hearing and visualizing it.
Oh, I love that. So, as I mentioned, I'm the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, so there's many different disciplines that come together within our college, and I'm interested in how the concept of story is central across all kinds of disciplines. Obviously, we see it in literature, and we, in theater, but we also see it in psychology and.
Well, it's become a thing now where, stories, the word story, in business, what is your story brand? And, people will talk about, well, the new narrative is on, for a political candidate, or how are they spinning their story? I can't separate it. I think it's the warp and woof of our lives. So what I'm listening to is within a few minutes, if I meet someone and you're having a thoughtful conversation, that they're telling you what's really on their mind and who they are and what their concerns are. And this is how we intersect with people. Everything is a story. I mean, the story of music and animation, the sports is all about story. Sports is all about discovering the courage that you can set a goal and achieve it and work in a team. Why do we thrive on sports stories? Because they have a natural climactic nature, and a loser and a winner and a hero. So I don't see it as anything separate. I don't see it as a distinct unit. I look around this beautiful art gallery and I look at all the stories that are being told. What was the impulse that made each of these artists want to do that? Is from a story within them that they're trying to tell. And I sometimes think the word story is it's a diluted word as far as its true power. What does it really mean? But it's actually the fabric of who we are as human beings in community. I mean, the richness of daily life, the longer we live, is that we're collecting stories, new stories every day, and weaving them into the knowledge of what we have. Yesterday I went to the Oklahoma City Memorial. I'd never been there before. Extraordinarily powerful. It takes me back, obviously, that's the point of it, to that day and that era and that end of the innocence for all of us. And yet now you reflect on, well, we've had September 11th and we've had all these other things, and we live in a different world now. And I think back to, at the memorial it has the 901 versus the 903, which is, for those of you who haven't seen this, is a depiction of what happened at 902, which was the explosion at the site of the government building. And that is the truth of storytelling, that there is a moment when you are forever changed. There's a choice that was made. In that case, it was a choice of evil. But then there was a choice at 9:03 when all these people ran into the fire to save lives. And all of the big thing I'm aware of with storytelling is that it's heightening and magnifying a choice that we all have on one day in our lives that we will have to make. We, ordinary people, will have to face an extraordinary choice. And I think the power of storytelling is, as we read it, it's fueling our psyches to realize someday that may fall to me, it may well fall to me, to make a choice I wouldn't otherwise make. Will I be prepared? And the only way you get prepared is by engaging in the culture in all these stories, no matter how difficult they are.
Yeah. So you do this seems to be so easy for you to kind of identify story and pull story out. You've worked with a lot of people and taught people to do this. What is it that makes it hard, such a challenge for people to tell their story? And how do you kind of get them past that?
I find that people mostly have been taught that they are not important, that their story is not important, or who cares, or everyone was living it at that time, so what makes my story exceptional? Mm-hmm. So the real important thing is to give people a sense of being heard. You're important. Your story matters. Tell me about it. On that day, what happened? And if you enter into the memory, the sense memory, for some people they remember sounds and other people remember textures. Mm-hmm. Certain things create taste memory. Lead people into a sense memory, you take them to the present moment. And something happens that's alive, and we are both experiencing this electricity of being more alive in storytelling. And I simply think it sparks our lives. We become better people. So for me, it's a life enjoyment. It's a pleasure, I guess. I wouldn't have it otherwise.
Yeah. So I'm interested, just kind of reading about what you do, what you have done, what you're currently doing, what your current title is. And I thought of the question, so how is digital storytelling, you're the professor of digital storytelling, how is that different, or is it different than storytelling in other mediums?
I don't think it is. I laughed when they gave me that title, digital storytelling. I think what it's referring to is now we're getting so much of our communication crossing boundaries digitally through social media, online. How does that affect how we're really interacting? I think there are major issues in this day and age with social media interactions because it's created the internet troll phenomenon where people are faceless and therefore feel blameless in their behavior. And so we're losing a sense of decorum and manners and humanity in that. But I think fundamentally storytelling to me is how do we connect? And it's only always about connecting. How do we cross boundaries? How do we create common ground? And in this world now where we're so fractured and it feels so tremulous, this political environment we're in, this is the only way where we can cross boundaries and listen to each other and reach out to each other and find a new way.
So how do you think our culture could benefit if all of us, if we all became better users of story? What would that look like?
Users of story, I don't know if I would use the word users.
Okay.
If we were all better listeners and if we all had the confidence to create an environment of listening and then sharing in the storytelling. It's not about just listening and being trod upon. Someone keeps talking away, you're like, oh, they made me listen to them. No, you don't want that. I just think that you create community. It's, first of all, it can be fun, it can be hilarious. And I grew up in an environment, and I'm sure this was true here in Oklahoma, where the main form of entertainment initially was storytelling.
Absolutely.
And people met and they'd say, I'll tell something on myself, and they'd tell something hilarious. And it was a way of dropping your guard and acting normal with someone, and they felt you were someone they could relate to. And then you could move into other discussions. And that is how we, as an immigrant nation, moved across this vast United States and made neighbors. And if we don't respect the power of that, we will start to create an enclave, siloed mentality of fear of the other. The only way the fear and the walls come down is by reaching out and telling stories and listening.
It seems that's the way we tear down barriers. We find out we share. What we share is much more similar than the things that are different in cultures and people and gender and
I've
race.
never seen this to fail. You always find common ground. And of course that leads to laughter, and it leads to sharing meals together. It leads to music. It leads to commonality. You know, in the early days of our immigrant nation, it led to barn building and helping each other out, bring the crops in. It leads to reaching out and creating new generations who cross boundaries. And so I just see this as the lifeblood of humanity.
And this is very similar. You may feel like you're answering the same question, but I also think about how could religion broadly benefit from, and I'm going to change my question from users to listeners and sharers of story. So how could religion broadly, and then how could maybe on a more individual basis, how could we individually build our faith more if we were better listeners and sharers?
Well, I'll take it back to the fact that none of us have enough imagination to lead our lives. And I think the word religion is another one of those weak words, like story. It can mean anything. It can sound threatening, and you can develop a defense against it. You know, I see it as, what is it to lead a spirit-based life? And I'm intrigued when I meet people from other spiritual disciplines that I have not grown up with. So I don't know what the parameters are. I have to lean in and learn what the parameters are. There may be customs that I could offend them with if I'm not aware. How do I learn that? I have to learn it. I listen to them. I observe. You know, so much of storytelling is about the process of, well, let me take it back to this. Mako Fujimura, who's a Japanese-American artist who works as an artist in residence at the Brehm Center at Fuller Seminary. He's written a book on culture care, and he talks about this concept of the outlier, that the beginning of civilization, when we all lived in tribes and we were hunkered down and afraid of the other, and then people easily were at war with each other and suspicious. But there was always the outlier who was willing to travel away from their tribe and go over that hill and visit the other tribe. Just why? Because that's who we are, curious people. And if the other tribe didn't kill you, because who are you? Why are you here? They might sit down and figure out a way to communicate and share. And the person from the first tribe can say, hey, you know, if you just venture out 2 mountains over, you're going to find a wonderful plain of buffalo or elk. It's wonderful pickings there for meat. Or they might say, oh, we discovered this cure by using this plant. That is how civilization advanced, by someone daring to go into a foreign tribe. And that's what I think of with when people talk about religion. We've all been born in a soup. We've all been born in our worldview. Some of us are Christians, others are Catholics, others are Jewish, others are Muslim. That worldview is shaping us all the time. But when we leave our tribe, we go out into the world and we discover new ways of interacting with the world. And fundamentally, all tribes are about well-being. Are you living well? They're all about community. They're all about how do we prosper and become our best selves. And if we can believe that in each other, that's how we advance as people.
That is beautiful and very fitting. We're coming to the end of the interview, but our Art Talk series came out of Fujimura's work.
Oh, really?
And culture care.
Oh.
And that was kind of our inspiration for what we wanted to do with Art Talks. And so that you brought that up is just beautiful. Just so appreciate you being here with us at Oklahoma Christian, sharing your time and your energy and your expertise and yourself with us and sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
We are blessed to have you, and looking forward to the rest of the day.
Well, it's such a dynamic place. I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to see all of this. Thank you for having me.